Welcome to PhilanthroThink from Carleton University's MP&L program. I'm Jonathan Harline.
I'm Titilayo Adedeji.
I'm Michaela Dion.
And I'm Mandy Pui.
We're your hosts this season, and we're excited to bring fresh perspectives to the show.
In each episode, we will chat with leaders, philanthropists, and innovators to explore the challenges and opportunities shaping philanthropy today.
Whether you're building wealth or driving change, you'll gain fresh insights, appreciation, and strategies to inspire your philanthropic work.
Enjoy the episode and don't forget to subscribe to the podcast.
Hi, and welcome to today's episode of PhilanthroThink. I'm Jonathan Harline.
And I'm Titilayo Adedeji. Ekabo.
And today we're joined by Annabel White, founder and co-CEO of Dragonfly Ventures. It's a Toronto-based family office directing capital toward environmental health and community well-being.
In this conversation, we'll explore Annabelle's journey into philanthropy and the impact investing and how Dragonfly Ventures deploy capital in service of people and the planet.
And thank you so much, Annabelle, for joining us. Welcome to PhilanthroThink.
Greetings, Jonathan and Titi. Thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, so I wanted to start, if you could take us back to the beginning, and maybe for our listeners who might not have read the Make Way interview, how did your work all get started?
So my history is that I am actually one of the rare people out there who inherited wealth. My inheritance story was that my family owned media in London, Ontario, so radio, newspaper, television. And I became a beneficiary of a trust in 1992 with my two siblings when, unfortunately, my mother passed away. So the family business was on my mother's side of the family. And at that point, I was 19 years old and really didn't have any control of the wealth or how it was being run until I turned 35 due to the trust structure that was set up.
Right. And how did that feel kind of at that moment, being 19 and kind of being a beneficiary like that? What kind of work did you have to do inwardly in order to put that forward to make your work happen?
So yeah, it was an incredibly challenging time. I was the youngest of two other siblings. It was, obviously I was pretty messed up when my mother passed away. My parents had already divorced and my dad was remarried. And actually he was planning to leave and move. He was planning to move to the US right around the time shortly after my mother passed away. So super challenging time. But one of the things that popped into my head when my mom died was, oh gosh, I'm going to have to learn how to either manage this money or hire the right people to manage it eventually for me. But, being so young, I was not prepared to do that at the time. So knowing about the trust structure and that the money was safe with the trustees that my mom had put in place, I really honestly set aside the responsibility for almost a decade before I actually started to get involved to learn about financial language and financial practices. So it took a while before I actually got into finance itself, just because I was young. I wasn't ready to do that emotionally. And I decided I wanted to give myself a little time to sort of grow up before I did that.
Understandable, having that inner constitution in order to kind of drive yourself forward. Is that kind of what leads you into kind of, in a way, you've kind of examined your role in how capital works, and what are you trying to do differently with your money in the way that it's usually deployed?
So it basically started because by the time I sort of turned 28, 29, I knew it was time to start learning how to manage wealth. And it was really honestly not something I truly loved or wanted to do. It was something I felt like it was a huge responsibility that I really needed to do. And it was tough. Like I forced myself to go to meetings with my trustees, and to be fair to them, they were very professional, honest people, and they had to manage the whole package as one package for my brother and sister and I. Rewinding a little bit, the actual physical assets were radio, newspaper, television, and most of those were sold. So with the financial proceeds of the sales, that money went into sort of typical bond equity structures. So I started to go to the meetings with the trustees, learning, financial language from a bond equity perspective. There were a few direct investments, like direct investments in other businesses, but I sort of didn't get involved in any of that. And also, before the companies were even sold, they did approach the three of us to ask us if we wanted to be involved in the companies themselves. But, being 19, I just decided that was too much. I wasn't ready. I hadn't been to university, and ultimately I didn't end up going to university at all. So for me, it was just too much. And that was why later, 9 years later, I started to go to the financial meetings and learn financial language. But it was a bit of a slog for me. It was learning a lot of financial language that didn't come easily to me. So I learned through repetition and asking a lot of questions after the meetings were finished. So I learned partly by osmosis, but also partly out of desperation, calling people saying, I don't know what that meant or whatever. And it's tough because I didn't want to look stupid or, there's a lot of insecurity around that, but I just kept asking questions and, looking things up on the internet and learning through that. So it was a process.
Yeah, that definitely takes a lot of resilience. Thank you. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to add to that. You were 19, right? You were 19.
Yeah.
What would you have expected? Anybody 19 and in that kind of situation will be terrified. So absolutely understandable. And it's been quite a very interesting story, your journey. And I can only imagine, because to be in that kind of situation must have been such a lot. And I just wanted to also commend the fact that you were learning by doing. You were in the process. A lot of people get to do the theory part and then come to the practical, but you went straight in to the practical. You were making these decisions. You were, involved, and I think that's something really commendable and wonderful. And one thing that I was a little bit curious about as you were speaking is, I understand that it was between the three of you, the siblings, but were there like tension between investing for financial returns and investing for social or, environmental impact? What was that like, and also deciding within the three siblings?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there was no tension because the way the trust was set up, the three of us really didn't have any control over how the money was invested until we each hit certain age benchmarks. So the way the trust was set up was we would each receive 25% of our individual distribution when we turned 35 years of age. And then we received another distribution at 40 years of age of another 25%. And then we would receive our final 50% distribution when we hit the age of 45 years old. So what our trustees did was they took on and held the responsibility for the management. And as I learned, I definitely did ask them, is there other ways of investing? And they sort of said to me, okay, well, if you want to do that, go to university, learn how to invest. But we're not going to do that because we still have our fiscal responsibility to measure or to manage this as a package for all three of you. So, and to be fair to them, they did a very professional job. They did a great job. There was no animosity. They were very direct. So it wasn't really until I'm the youngest of the three siblings, so I was the last to get my final distribution. But it wasn't until we each had a distribution that we had autonomy over or agency over how it was managed.
Oh wow, that's amazing. I'm glad that setup was there. That gave you some bit of a room, to think things through and really, come into the responsibilities that was upon you. Family offices often focus on preserving wealth, and Dragonfly Ventures take a different approach, is more impact driven approach. And my question is, how do you think about that responsibility? What frames the responsibility that comes with that?
Yeah, I mean, another great question. So I am an individual. I've never been married. I don't have children. So I have a lot of freedom to do what I want with my wealth. I knew a long, long time ago that I had more wealth than I actually needed. And also because of my grandfather. My grandfather years ago, and the Blackburn Group itself in London was very philanthropically aligned. So I learned philanthropy starting from my grandfather, like giving back to the community, and he put in some practices in the companies where there were committees within the companies where staff could make decisions for their benefit within practices within the company. And so those types of things kind of sat with me for a long time, and I knew I was going to I knew I wanted to give back to the community. And I'm also very lucky because I don't really have to think about a successionary plan with children or
Right.
or my siblings. My siblings are taken care of as well. So I had a lot more freedom than I think most people do. Although, I mean, the freedom is also sort of the other end of it is that less connections with family mean less connections with family as well. So I'm autonomous and have the freedom, but maybe that's too much, and a little bit of isolation is happening too. So
Yeah, so it sounds like, that family dynamic has definitely been a positive influence in how you think about, your wealth and community impact. And I guess I was following that line of community impact. It seems that you're fairly focused on these environmental, like reducing the harmful chemicals. That's a major focus of Dragonfly Ventures, as I understand. And what is it that drew you to that issue specifically when you're thinking about community impact?
yeah, another great question, part of my journey. So just before I turned 35, that was the age where I got my first 25% distribution. I was looking for another way. Like prior to that, I was sitting in a meeting with a financial analyst, and I was just kind of rolling my eyes thinking, oh my God, how boring is this? And not fully understanding what analysts does, or not fully understanding the content. And I just was like, I had a pure thought that I was like, there's got to be another way of doing this. Through friends of friends, just again, like I said, just before I turned 35, I met another woman, Carol Newell, and her team, Joel Solomon, they're based in BC. Carol had a very similar backstory to me, and she, at that point, was inviting people to come to Hollyhock, which she helped found. And she was telling her story, her financial story, and what she was essentially telling people about what she did to activate her money. And I realized when I was at that conference that, hey, this is like a light bulb moment for me. Hey, this is the new way. And if I realized if Carol was doing it, then so could I. So her story helped me move forward in developing my own process. So what she did at this convening at Hollyhock was some of the people that had nurtured her and helped her through figuring out her journey were offering their professional services to anyone who was there. So the two people that I reached out to after that, one was a tax expert who's now retired. He was a partner at Ernst & Young. And then another person that I reached out to was a woman who was doing financial and life coaching. So Jim Morrissey was giving me great tax advice. And then Marion Moore and I worked together for close to 15 years after that. So Marion essentially helped she started asking me a lot of questions, drawing out how I spent my time, asking things like, what kind of world do you want to live in the future? And what are the things that get you out of bed in the morning? And having grown up with a lot of connections to Georgian Bay here in Ontario, and skiing, snowboarding, horses, farmland. So I was very connected to the land, which nurtured me. And I realized I wanted to be investing in clean water, clean energy, and freshwater. Well, I said freshwater conservation, and land and soil health. So it started my mission, vision, values started from more of a environmental perspective, but it eventually, I realized it was at the convergence of human health and environmental health as well. So
100%. Like, I love how you've talked about the land that nurtured you, and so giving back. That stewardship mentality is huge and very impactful. And I was wondering, when you're making these decisions about where you invest, and you're kind of going up against some other companies, some profitable companies that kind of you're kind of going up against them a little bit. Do you ever have to pull an investment from a company because it conflicted with your mission? Is that how do you balance that?
Yeah, that's a great questions. So I kind of yes and kind of no. I wouldn't say that I've had to pull investments away, but it was more developing a screening process before entering into relationships. Like, I'm still very heavily invested in public equities and bonds. So over time, as I developed my team and developed my processes, we created a screening process where I screened out a lot of oil and oil supporting companies. What else? Like, I've screened out specific things like nuclear. I'm not a fan of nuclear. I know it's considered, I can't remember if it's clean or green energy, but the problem that I see with nuclear is the waste. The screening was really about trying to create a mission, vision, values, pick companies where those mission, vision, values matched, but then also the screening out of things from my equity and bond portfolios. We haven't really tackled the screening on the bond portfolio as much, but it was more, and chemicals. So later I started to get into the chemical screening as well. So I haven't really had to exit any relationships, but I would say that has happened a little bit with the equity portfolio side.
And now, a word from IG Private Wealth Management.
Today, we're focusing on donor-advised funds. I'm joined by Christine Van Kalmenberg, Head of Financial Planning at IG Private Wealth Management. Christine, for listeners who may not know, what exactly is a donor-advised fund, and why are so many families choosing this approach?
Thanks, Jonathan, for the question. Well, what we're seeing is there are a number of families who want to create effectively a capital fund for their charitable giving. So they enjoy making regular gifts, but they also want to put in a larger sum that might actually grow a little bit in terms of earning more capital, but then they make distributions on an annual basis in a bit more thoughtful manner. And I think historically, a lot of these families would have created a private foundation, but private foundations are actually very expensive. So you need to go see a lawyer. It can cost thousands, in some cases tens of thousands of dollars to create one. you have to go to the CRA and get a charitable donation number, which can take, in fact, years. And then you need to manage this fund long term, and it's just a significant hassle and burden for a lot of families. And the other interesting part about private foundations is they're actually pretty public, because you have to list with the CRA how much is in the account, who manages the account, and give that disclosure. So instead, a lot of families have chosen to make donations to public foundations, and IG Private Wealth, in fact, has a foundation, and it's, the way I describe it is effectively a charitable parking lot. So what we've done is we've gone through the agony of going to the CRA and applying for the charitable number, and we have the whole infrastructure in place that you don't have to pay for. You would just create an account with IG. And in fact, we have the lowest threshold in the industry, because you can create a donor advised fund for as little as $10,000. And then, in fact, when we report to the CRA, we only report at the fund level, at the foundation level. We don't disclose the amounts that each of our individual clients have in each of their accounts. And so it's quite private. It's quite simple and straightforward. And then we issue one charitable donation receipt to that client. It makes it easier for tax filing. And then on a go forward basis, yes, there are disbursements quotas, and they do need to disperse 5% to charities every year. But in many cases, they're earning somewhere in the range of 5%. And it just sort of is this self-fulfilling thing where they're able to keep this capital fund. And it's actually often better for the charities, because if they had a large, let's say they came into a large inheritance and they wanted to make a large donation all at once, for some small charities, that's actually a lot to ingest. And they would rather have regular annual amounts that they can count on to meet their payroll. And so in many cases, it's better for both the donor and the charity.
Amazing. Thank you for being with us, Christine. And until next time, this is PhilanthroThink with IG Private Wealth Management.
This is a general source of information only. It is not intended to provide personalized tax, legal, or investment advice, and is not intended as a solicitation to purchase securities. For more information on this topic or any other financial matter, please contact an IG advisor. The IG Charitable Giving Program is offered together with the Strategic Charitable Giving Foundation, which operates independently from IG Wealth Management. Donations are irrevocable and vest with the foundation. This information is general in nature and not intended to be professional tax advice. Please read the program guide for complete details, including fees and expenses.
Now, back to the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so interesting. Thank you so much for that. And just to piggyback a little bit on something that you said also, and as personally someone that has a background in environmental biochemistry, so I would say that it's actually interesting how environmental health connects directly to community well-being, because the truth is even, environmental issues they are also public health issues, right? So, and just a follow-up that I have on that is, do you find that there's awareness around toxic chemicals and environmental health? Is it growing? Do you think it's growing within philanthropy? Do you think there's more awareness about that?
Another great question. I think it's tough to connect. So rewinding a little bit. So I went to a lot of conferences to learn a lot of different things over time. So when I turned 35, I really started to delve into this type of learning, going to conferences, talking to people, figuring out where my interests are and trying to focus on learning in those sectors. And it's hard because there was a lot of fatigue in terms of environmental investing. And we got to a point where we realized people were really not focused on environmental health because human health was such a problem. So people really want to solve the human health problem first. So when we were doing some of our convenings and such, we realized we really had to change the approach from environmental health more to the human health perspective in order to get more other groups involved in what we were doing. So yeah, and I mean, there's definitely some overlap between human and environmental health, but I think people are just a little bit tired of hearing about environmental problems and wanting to really tackle the human health. And so we pivoted a little bit in that area, but the truth is they're all connected.
Looking at the work that Dragonfly Ventures has supported over the years, are there particular projects or initiatives that feels especially proud, that you're proud of? And where are you going next? If you could just take us a little bit into some of that.
Yeah, so I would say my personal favorite is it's more of a general approach. So blended finance and using different tools to both invest and do our charitable work. So we've dabbled in many different ways of engaging with either both our investees and our grantees. One of my personal favorite blended finance programs that we've been doing for a long time is an organization in Clyde River on Baffin Island. Originally, this was brought to me by my, so I originally had a donor advised fund with Tides Canada, and I funded an Arctic scoping program for them to go across Canada's north. And they discovered Illisaxivik, which is based, as I said, in Clyde River on Baffin Island. And what they had done was the community recognized that there were some significant community problems, and there was some government help that was actually failing in that community to try and help the people there. So 3 of the local women who were involved in working with the government realized that it was time to start their own programming in that community in their own language for their community members. So they literally, the story was that they picked up their equipment, walked across the street, abandoned the government building and walked into a new building and started creating their own programming to help serve to help serve their own community, but it also has now branched out to across the whole of Arctic Canada. So they've been in operation now, I think, for 26 or 27 years. And about 10 years ago, what they needed to do was create a for-profit business in order to help fund their not-for-profit services. So they ended up building a hotel, which took a while to build. So we at Dragonfly had been funding their not-for-profit, their programming for a while. And then we actually became one of many lenders. We gave them a friendlier interest rate so that they could build the hotel. So the profits from that hotel would serve the community programs that they were running at the other organizations. So essentially, it's a blended finance tool. And they've now been able to purchase a second hotel that is undergoing renovations. That first hotel, they've never missed a payment to us personally. And they're still running their programming, and they're incredibly successful. So that's one of my personal favorites.
That's amazing. That is, and I personally, I have this thing for community-led solutions. I love it. And even within my personal work with communities in Nigeria, I have seen how most sustainable change often comes from directly, it comes directly from the communities themselves. And that is absolutely beautiful to hear. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah. And then, part of our practices going forward also, and looking back, I have never put restrictions on my funding. So I don't strictly fund programming. It's general funding so that those organizations can spend that wherever it's most needed. No matter what, I always know that with unrestricted funding, it's still going to programming. It just might be going to operational costs, and I'm totally fine with that. And also it has to be community driven. So not like I have understood that community knows community best, and they need to be in charge running their own community-based programs. It's not my place to tell those communities how to run their programming. They need to run it themselves because they know their community best.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I actually wanted to build off that maybe a little bit because it sounds like you're really kind of embodying this trust-based philanthropy, trust-based relationships with the communities you help. And I was wondering if you would, if you were in front of someone who was trying to be convinced about adopting like a trust-based mentality, what would you say to try to convince them? Like what benefit was it to you to kind of have that mentality in the first place?
Yeah, so I think that the first thing I would say to people is if you're not sure, like start to build a relationship slowly with a community group and start with one group. Like pick something that does pique your interest and get to know that community group and take your time. Like do your due diligence and build a bit of a relationship first, but don't do it in an extractive way. Like make sure that even though you're building a relationship, that you're talking through what you're trying to achieve. And if there's points where remuneration or some kind of stipend or payment should be made, like do that, because those people are giving their time. And they are sharing their IP, and it's a privilege to be able to learn from those people as well. But do your due diligence. And I would say take your time, get to know your organization, and build that relationship. There can be times where sort of just being transactional works, but build relationships with people, get to know the organization, and just even if it's one, just start with one, and talk to those people. And that's what I would say.
Thank you so much for that. That's very insightful. Thank you, TD, for that question originally. And it just kind of seems like all this together, like the blended finance, the trust-based kind of thing, and then using your investments and your grants to make sure that it pulls in the same direction. And so how does that, like, what is your frame of mind when it comes to the role of capital and putting it into practice with Dragonfly Ventures?
That's such a good question. You're asking great questions. I keep saying that.
Yeah.
So I am very cynical about the financial industry. It is a deeply broken system. And I this goes back to me as a 15-year-old. So I had this very visceral moment when I was young and 15 years old growing up in London. And I kind of woke up one day realizing that I came from a very wealthy family in a small city. And I felt different, and I didn't like that. Like I felt isolated because of the wealth. And I was like, oh, I'm 15. I just want to give it all away. So, I mean, coming from a very immature kind of thought process. But it's stuck with me for a long time, but I've turned it into a much more, a process where there's reconciliation and acknowledging that, money needs to sort of come from the ultra wealthy and be funneled down to people who need it the most. And I'm a firm believer that money in circulation, where more people have more access to it, unlocks so much wisdom and beauty in this world. And that's the world that I want to live in the future. So just knowing that I had way more than enough personally, but I wish more people would take that thought process on. And I try to lead by example, but we don't need billionaires in this world. We do not need trillionaires. Like that just makes me actually kind of sick to my stomach. And I wish there was more things put in place, like policy, government, whatever, to encourage more circulation of dollars, because money in circulation serves way more people.
Right. That's so good. That's so good. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. All right.
And I was going to connect it to a little bit, like kind of, we have a tradition here. We like to keep a little chain going. And speaking of like kind of keeping that circulation going, Eric Peterson, co-founder and co-director of the Tula Foundation and the founder of Hakai Institute, he left a question for you. So each guest leaves a question for the next. In last episode, Eric Peterson asks, how do you think about building long-term initiatives when the world feels increasingly unpredictable?
That is such a tough question. Oh gosh. So the question is, how do you
plan for build long-term initiatives when everything feels so urgent and unpredictable?
I truly think that the days of big corp are numbered. I would say invest in local communities and help build really solid, amazing, long-term community businesses, because that's the heart of local community. And even sometimes, knowing that not every business is going to be sort of that proverbial unicorn that's going to be sold off to some massive conglomeration or whatever, building really, really solid local foundational businesses in communities and helping those communities last as long as they can is super critical.
Absolutely. And I just love the way, that the way your response kind of bring together investing, philanthropy, and partnership. I feel like they all have to go hand in hand, especially to build, sustainable, impact and social change. So thank you so much for that. Thank you, Annabelle. And just to follow up on that, and finally, what one question would you like to leave for our next guest? So we don't know who they are yet, but imagine they are a philanthropist, a change maker, or a community leader shaping the future. What would you like to ask them?
I don't know. I knew this question was coming, and I was like, oh God, what am I going to ask the person who's coming next? I think the question I would ask is, what world do you want to leave for your children and grandchildren? And what steps can you take today to make that real?
Wow. That is great. And it's deep.
Speaking of tough questions, that's gonna be a good one.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Thank you, Annabelle.
Thank you, Annabelle. It's been great getting to chat with you. It feels like there's been a great theme of community focus, community empowerment, and it's just been wonderful to have this conversation with you on PhilanthroThink.
Yeah, thank you both so much. It's been a pleasure.